President Trump is the most sued president in American history. There's always lawsuits going on. Right now, we've got stuff in the Supreme Court. We've got a judge that they want to impeach. We've got people finally being held accountable, hopefully, for the Russia hoax. To help me go through all this, I have Robert Gouveia from Watching the Watchers here on YouTube. Robert, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. Really great to see you.
You do such a great job of breaking down the legal news and covering what's really going on. Thank you so much for taking time out. So I saw this story that I think is really important, where now you've got several sitting members of Congress saying, okay, we have to impeach Judge Boasberg, not because of all of the crap that he's done to Donald Trump. He should definitely have been reviewed for that. But now he allowed them to spy on us, give up data about us, put our families in danger. Tell me what you know about Judge Boasberg and this effort to impeach him.
You're exactly right. Senators and House representatives are fuming mad, and we haven't seen them this mad in a long time. As you mentioned, if it's FISA, if they're spying on us, if they're kicking in the doors for J6ers, then they're all pretty quiet about that. But once their phone records got spied on, man, they came out of the woodwork. They're doing press conferences, sending letters, opening up probes. And we're happy to see it because it's really about the right issue. It's about Judge Boasberg. And this guy is a longtime judge. He's in the D.C. District Court right in Washington. And so he's got a lot of power over a lot of very important matters. And we've already seen him pop up many times in the Trump new term, where he's issuing nationwide injunctions and stopping the president from actually doing the job of the presidency. But what we're learning now is that even before this second term of the president, Judge Boasberg was behind the scenes just digging into the Republican side. And of course, we know a lot, and I know you've talked a lot about Jack Smith and the special counsel and all of the Trump prosecutions there. But Boasberg, he's an Obama appointee. And after Trump, lost in 2020, what we saw was Jack Smith get appointed and start just firing off these demands, these subpoena requests over to Judge Boasberg, essentially. And this was back in 2022 and 2023. And Boasberg was just rubber stamping these subpoenas. And these subpoenas were not just to your ordinary citizen or average Joe, even though that would be a problem too. But these were for senators. These were for their phone records. And they were all Republicans. And what makes this even, worse than the fact that Jack Smith got approval from a federal judge to go spy on congressional members, that alone is a problem. But in addition to that, there were also non-disclosure agreements or non-disclosure orders that came down from Judge Boasberg. So he would say to Jack Smith, yes, you can send records requests, demands over to Verizon and AT&T, but you also have the power to not even notify Congress about this, which is insane because many of these congressional senators and representatives, they have their cell phones through government systems, basically through government contracts. And many of the senators were on Verizon. And so Verizon was coordinating with the Senate Sergeant at Arms. And in other words, these were kind of official phone lines that were being tapped by their oppositional party, by Jack Smith, who, as we know, was illegally appointed and working directly for Joe Biden, essentially, was going after the Republicans. And then a federal judge was rubber stamping that and saying, you can't even tell the senators about this, even though there are other statutes that say, if you're going to be basically tapping the Senate phones, you got to notify the Senate about this so they can object, so that they can say, well, what is the basis? What's the predicate for tapping a senator's phones, and go into the courts and object, right? Respond to this and say, you don't have the power to do it. But the scandal's deep because not only was Jack Smith and Boasberg going after the senators and sending a bunch of subpoenas to Verizon, but they sent a bunch to AT&T. And the interesting thing here was AT&T, they got a request. Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, he had his cell phone over on their system. And when they went to AT&T, AT&T's legal team, they got a subpoena. It says, oh, we got to go spy on a senator, basically. Their legal department reviewed it and said, we can't comply with this. So they responded to Jack Smith and they said, hey, Jack, what's your legal basis for doing this? And they didn't respond, right? So Jack Smith just kind of realized, this is a problem, and didn't pursue it any further. So AT&T did the right thing and didn't turn the documents over, but Verizon did. And what this leads me to believe is that AT&T did the proper legal analysis on the case. Okay. Judge Boasberg did not. He was the one who was just rubber stamping these things for Jack Smith. He should have known better. All of this was done, corruptly, in my opinion, to abuse their political opponents. And now the documents are coming out, right? The senators realize this. We've got the Trump administration and whistleblowers now come into the Senate and saying, look what they did. Look at all the documents here on their faces. And the senators are saying, now it's time to impeach. And we just had articles of impeachment filed, really, that's addressing a lot of these things from Brandon Gill. And for the first time in a long time, there's some real momentum against a federal judge, which we just have not seen thus far, even in the aftermath of all these nationwide injunctions and all of the judicial attacks that have been unloading across the country.
Now, my understanding is when someone's made a special counsel, they're supposed to be like walled off and given the ability to do stuff. But we see that the wall comes down. Jack Smith interacts with J6. The wall goes up. He goes to Verizon. The wall goes up. Goes to AT&T. Wall goes up. Goes to Fani Willis. Goes to Liz Cheney. Goes to the White House. So number one, this is a major problem. Wouldn't you guess, just an educated guess, that there were Democrats that knew Biden was using Jack Smith to spy on Republicans only?
Definitely within the Biden administration. I mean, a lot of this was rubber stamped by Lisa Monaco. FBI Director Christopher Wray was sending memos over to Merrick Garland. And so the whole Biden administration knew that this stuff was going on. And exactly like you said, they did this little scam where they tried to say that Jack Smith was independent. He's a special counsel. And what they're trying to do is launder this old phrase called independent counsel into the conversation. And there used to be, decades ago, a statute that actually Congress created an independent counsel, which had all sorts of constitutional problems because it's hard to create independent branches of the government via statute. It's unconstitutional, really. And so they were trying to create this independent operation, and it didn't last, right? Congress couldn't renew it. The whole thing was just rife with problems. And so what Merrick Garland did and Joe Biden did is they cobbled together all of these other statutes. Like they went to the FBI statutes, they went over here, and they just plucked all these different statutes together, and they called them the Reno regulations under Janet Reno, used her as kind of precedent. And they just made up Jack Smith, but they sold it to everybody every day in the media, like Biden's not in charge, or he doesn't report to Merrick Garland, or it's all separated out. In truth, the fact is they were colluding. And I think that Jack Smith was really the hub of a lot of all of the prosecutions, right? He was a federal prosecutor, so he's absolutely directly responsible for the J6 case and the Florida classified documents case. But we also saw that in addition to getting his subpoenas rubber stamped by Judge Boasberg, we also saw direct collusion between him and the January 6th Select Committee, where they sent letters to his office that have now come out saying, we're going to keep giving you information on a rolling basis as we get it. And this is so egregious because Jack Smith, in order to get subpoenas for the senators, had to at least go to a judge. Okay. And the judge, as corrupt as Boasberg is, in my opinion, he signed off on those things. But back during January 6th and the Select Committee days, which was illegally constituted, I can never not point that out because they didn't follow their own rules. They were sending letters to everybody, like 17-page letters from Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney to everybody, influencers, campaign managers, companies, demanding everything. We want your text messages. We want to know what you had for lunch. Did you even think about Donald Trump yesterday? The list went on. And those were congressionally mandated demands that came over from the January 6th Select Committee. So zooming out, it's like the January 6th Select Committee was acting almost as a prosecutorial body that didn't have the same safeguards and checks that you would have in an actual prosecutorial body, right? Where prosecutors actually have to follow the law, go to judges, get stuff signed off on. So Jack was gobbling up information with his corrupt approvals from a judge and also getting information from the J6 committee. And then there's even more evidence that Jack Smith used that in his prosecutions of Trump, but then likely also funneled this stuff out to Fani Willis in Georgia so that she could indict a bunch of people. We saw Jack Smith and the FBI were pumping people in the Georgia prosecution for information, and then they realized they couldn't charge them federally, so they just passed it off to Fani Willis. Same thing happening with Alvin Bragg and the Biden DOJ. They sent Matthew Colangelo, the number 3 at the time, at the Biden DOJ. He resigned, left, went over, and then started working with Alvin Bragg. So the whole thing was just a Democrat operation, and they were perverting the rules in order to gather evidence and just really complete this dragnet that caught everybody. I mean, it caught everybody in it. Charlie Kirk, Turning Point, senators, House representatives, campaign organizations, everything just got brought under this umbrella. And they sold it to us like it was a fair and independent investigation, when really it was millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of the American taxpayer funds going in to support these corrupt prosecutors. And now we're starting to see the documents come out, and we're hopeful, and thank you for having us on to talk about it, that we can keep the energy up on this so the senators and the House of Representatives will move forward with this impeachment, because we have to see some consequences for this corruption.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, Charlie Kirk said that he was crying on election night because it meant that them going after him would go away. I mean, they were trying to ruin his life, take down Turning Point, really messed up stuff. Okay, let me switch gears with you. Talk to me about this new evidence about James Comey. So they do the grand jury. They decide to indict him on, I believe, 2 of the 3 things, and then he's going to have this trial at the beginning of January. Then, within just the last couple of days, I don't know if it was leaked or purposely just released, but the handwritten notes of him colluding on this Trump-Russia connection story. What do you know about this, and how will this impact his trial?
Yeah, those notes came from a burn bag that was stuffed in some closet that Kash Patel, I think, found back in April, as soon as he came back in. And so a lot of this, I think, was trying to be buried so they would never see the light of day. And James Comey got indicted, I think it was 5 days before the statute of limitations would have expired. So if they didn't charge him, he would not have been charged at all. So it was kind of just to bury it, never look at it again. But the handwritten notes help prove that James Comey's a liar, that he lied to Congress. He got 2 charges that were brought against him. One was false statements to Congress, and the other was obstruction. And he came into Congress many times and was asked about essentially what became Crossfire Hurricane, which was the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that was all made up by Obama and the people who were working there at the time, of which Comey was one of them. So Comey, Clapper, the director of national intelligence, James Clapper, was the national intelligence, John Brennan, CIA. They all got together and they created this new intelligence community assessment right after Trump won to try to now say that there's Russian connections. And this turned into a big scandal for Trump, right? We had the impeachment, we had Mueller. His whole first 2 years were dragged through the mud because of this fake scandal. But it all emanated from Hillary Clinton and from her campaign. They created what many people have heard of as the Steele dossier, which was a fake intelligence report that was trying to distract information away from Hillary Clinton's email problem. And Comey knew about this plan. And the handwritten notes, if you see it, it's him scribbling on an FBI director notepad. And one line in there, as he's talking about Hillary Clinton's health, and it's kind of an update on the election and national security threats, he marks in there HRC plan to tie to Trump. And it's about her operation. And he knew about it. So he puts it in his notes. And then ultimately the Steele dossier was funneled to the FBI by Hillary Clinton's campaign lawyers, guys that you see still out there, called Mark Elias and Michael Sussman. They were working for Perkins Coie, Hillary's law firm. They got the report. They tried to sell the report to the FBI, James Baker. They went and met with his attorney, and then they sent it out to the media. And so they were playing both sides of this. And that report, the Steele dossier, ran its way through the CIA, through the FBI. They ended up including it in that ICA, that intelligence community assessment, but they tucked it, buried it in a classified annex that was classified to the highest level. And so anybody reading the report, they would say, oh, well, what is this intelligence based off of, that Trump is colluding with Russia, or that the Russians had a clear preference for Trump, and all the nonsense that we heard? Well, it was all based off a classified annex. And so all the senators, everybody goes, oh, well, it must be classified. Nobody can see it. It's so compartmentalized. It's hidden. It was Hillary Clinton's Steele dossier. It was a fake campaign propaganda report. And Comey was asked about this in Congress multiple times by Chuck Grassley, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and he lied about it. He knew that it was a Hillary op the entire time, and they just were, maneuvering the data so they could create an intelligence product to feed to Barack Obama to try to deviate Trump's victory. And in many ways it worked until Trump, shockingly, really came back, had the greatest political comeback in history of all time, and then now has his hands on those very documents. So we're starting to see it. And in the Comey case, it came out because Lindsay Halligan filed a response. Remember, many people were calling Lindsay Halligan like this blonde bimbo prosecutor who doesn't know what she's doing, Trump's, hatchet man, hatchet woman, whatever. Well, she was responding to James Comey's motion. So Comey said, you have to dismiss this entire case against us because it's selective prosecution and vindictive prosecution. And Halligan just put all of this in a reply and said, look, this is all the evidence that we have against you. And we went through 14 different exhibits, just one after another, of James Comey, his emails back and forth with Daniel Richman, another person through whom he was facilitating leaks to the media that he also lied about. And so it's all just coming out, and it is glorious to see. And I think there's a lot more there. And the fact that we found these items in the burn bags is amazing. That makes me wonder, what else did they delete that we don't actually have? What actually got, put in the incinerator that is now lost to history?
Microplastics are everywhere in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. It's awful. Their effects are multiplying, wreaking havoc throughout our body. It impairs our heart, our lungs, even our bones. Our bones are the framework of our body, fueling movement, balance, overall fitness. Scientists have also found that the accumulation of microplastics has severe consequences on the amount of muscle mass we retain. Even if you eat clean or avoid packaged foods, exposure to these detrimental particles is unavoidable. They infiltrate our system, cut the gut lining, or disrupt our ability to maintain daily health and strength. A healthy gut is your first line of defense to fight back. Recent human studies have found that there are strains of probiotics found only in kimchi that absorb and excrete microplastics. These probiotics are the armor for our gut to destroy and flush out the harmful toxins. Now, defend your body. Restore your gut natural balance with the power of Kimchi One. All the benefits of kimchi in a convenient capsule form. In a world full of plastics, give your gut the protection it deserves. Today, you can get an exclusive offer by clicking the link below or use code Gardner for 25% off. For an even better deal, call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. Call them at 888-908-4425. Again, 25% off if you click the QR code or the link below, or call them. 50% off plus free shipping. Do it today. I know. You might have known this, but I just read this last night. While James Comey is investigating Hillary Clinton using a private email server to share information with other countries and her staffers and all that, James Comey was using a private email server to leak information to the New York Times and other things about Trump. Like, what? I just barely read that last night.
He had a whole pseudonym email. His name was like Reinhold Niebuhr, which is some, old, like a political philosopher. And he had a fake Gmail account, and they were communicating, and he was giving directions specifically to Daniel Richman, who would then leak it to the media. He would say, hey, great job. You did a great job on that. And then Daniel would respond, this journalist is getting pretty aggressive with me. Let me hit him back. And then Comey would say, hit him back. And he did it. And then Comey shared, like the next day, another New York Times article after the journalist gets pressured. And then Comey says, great job. This is kind of fun, isn't it? All through his private emails and sharing information that came from the Bureau. So it is, these people have no shame, honestly. And he came out and exonerated Hillary Clinton ultimately at the end. He said he changed the memo from saying that she committed a crime, which would have been meeting an evidentiary standard. If she did something that was grossly negligent, then okay, that meets the standard. But he changed it into extremely careless. And then tried to get it out before the election and thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. That's another big drop there. He said,
Yes.
Hillary Clinton, President-elect Clinton, will really like what I've done here. And we go, the election hasn't even happened yet. So you're trying
Adam
to do
Schiff
all
did the same thing. He thought he was going to be the head of the CIA.
That's exactly right. And so they were all like kids in a candy store, man. They just thought that they could just get it all and do whatever they wanted because Hillary would win. And at the time, the numbers were like 92%, 97. You saw that. And she didn't win. So then they all realized, man, they have to distance themselves from this. And they did. And they were hoping that the statute of limitations would expire without any consequences, but they didn't. And so here we are.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned kids in a candy store. They need to be prisoners in a commissary. We'll see what ends up happening. Speaking of this, you mentioned the name John Brennan. He's been criminally referred. Where do you see his case going?
Yeah, I think he is as liable or more liable than James Comey. And so we're very hopeful that those charges are being investigated now as well. There's been a bunch of clips of John Brennan, former CIA director, out at meetings and out on the DC Metro. And people are approaching him with cameras saying, hey, you said also, basically they're pointing their fingers at each other. So the FBI said that this classified annex, of which Brennan was a part of creating, Brennan said that was an FBI product. FBI says, no, that was a CIA product. And Brennan lied about that explicitly. He said that people asked him in Congress, hey, John, did you have any role in the creation of that classified annex? And he said, no, we had nothing to do with it. It came from the FBI. They wanted it in there. But Congress has been investigating the team that was responsible for creating this product. They were highly compartmentalized, and they found in, I think it was an OIG report or a Congressional Permanent Select Committee report, an intelligence report, where they said that the CIA, the actual drafter of that intelligence product, confirmed that he wrote it. He says, no, we drafted it. We did get some input from the FBI, and that he brought that to Brennan. And Brennan has all these quotes, all these statements of saying, well, it sort of rings true. They said it's not true, but it sort of rings true, doesn't it? And so just kind of, play along, be a team player, and turn your key on this ICA. And so hopefully, I think, he's next in line. He's a big get, and we got statute of limitations concerns with him too. So we have to think about how the DOJ is prioritizing these. When did these guys testify to Congress? How much time do we have before that 5-year statute expires? And we know Pam Bondi and the DOJ, Arctic Frost, all of this stuff coming from Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson is just slowly compounding. And so I think Brennan is the next logical person to be indicted, and he needs to be. He was very, very complicit in all of this fraud.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with that. What you said, Mike Morrell, who was the acting head of the CIA during the Hunter Biden laptop, they said, you knew that this was wrong. Don't you feel bad about misleading people? And he said, well, you never can trust Russia. Like that was his answer, is like, well, I feel good about lying because Russians lie. No, dude, you lied. You lied. Okay. Final question. I appreciate you coming on. Everyone needs to go check out Robert's channel, and I'll put a direct link down below. But President Trump is talking about getting rid of the filibuster, saying that it's getting in the way of him doing what he wants. If Democrats get back in, they've already said they'll get rid of it. They'll pack the courts. They will literally go bonkers. The only people that stopped them was Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who they destroyed their careers and pushed them out. What would be the process for that? Is that more of the Senate decides, or does that end up going to the Supreme Court or a federal court?
Yeah, the Senate sets its own rules. So the houses are empowered by the Constitution to create rules for themselves, and they can govern themselves, and they can, manage their own affairs. And it's pretty clearly in there. And so the filibuster, actually, if you look at the history of it, it wasn't something that was original. As soon as our country was founded and we ratified the Constitution, there was no filibuster, which at this moment would require 60 senators, so 3/5 of the senators, to join in ending the debate so we can proceed to a vote. And if you can't get over that 60, then you can't, close debate, and you can't get to a vote. And so legislation just basically stalls out. But originally, under the Constitution, we had just a simple majority in both houses. And the filibuster was a rule that came about later in the Senate, and it's been through a bunch of different modifications, and they set their own rules. Originally, I think it was 2/3, but that was too high of a standard to get across. So then they lowered it to 3/5. And so it's all internal rules, and they can decide what to do on this. And my understanding on the process as to how you would nuke the filibuster to get rid of it and just make it so it's a simple majority vote is there's a procedural mechanism by which I think you appeal a ruling, appeal a decision in the Senate. And then once you have somebody sitting in judgment on the appeal, to make a decision on the appeal, you just need a simple majority. So in other words, you could kind of work your way up and then bypass, they call it the nuclear option, the 60 vote majority, just have a simple vote to change the rules. And then moving forward, you would then have no basically 60 vote threshold to move legislation forward. So there's historical precedent for that. And if we want to go back to the time where we're just a country where we have simple majority votes in both houses, that's a debate to have. And it changes the political dynamics, I think, pretty completely. But for most of modern history, I think in the early 1900s, they started to modify the rules. And what we see now is the Senate, many people have commented on it being the cooling saucer of our republic, right? There's a lot of activity in the House, and it only actually goes anywhere if there's more than just a simple majority in the Senate, right? If it reaches a certain threshold. And so, I know President Trump is on it. And I do believe that if President Trump was all of the Senate and all of the House, then he would do a great job of, passing legislation through that would work very well for us. But I don't have a lot of faith in Congress, in our Republican Party. And I think that if they nuke the filibuster, what would it be for? To reopen the government? Do we think that they're actually going to go and pass all of the things that Trump wants anyways, which would be, like voter ID and like deportation orders and tariffs and all those things? I don't see the Republican Party springing into action like we know the Democrats will and would. And, if they ever get the trifecta again, they don't play, they don't mess around. But the Republicans, I just have my doubts that they would take it and run with it and do anything useful with it. And what we would get in return is just this new procedural rule that might actually be used to abuse us more than it would actually help us, because the Republicans, I think, just play at a different caliber.
Yeah. I say all the time on my show, Democrats have terrible ideas, but they're unified in getting those passed. And Republicans have great ideas, and they're terrible at getting things across the finish line. It's like, can you just learn from each other, get some better ideas, and get some balls to get some courage to actually get something across. Robert, thank you so much. You do such a great job of articulating this. I know you follow so many different legal cases. In addition to pushing people to your YouTube channel, is there anywhere else I should push people?
That's the place to be. We go live 5 days a week. Right now we're at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We go through the documents here on our channel. So we'd love to have you come join us. And Stephen, thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure to hang with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.